So I watched this movie about a week ago, and I was initially not going to make a review about it, but screw it. Why not? Hey everyone, my name is Max Aaron James. This is a review of the movie Napoleon, written by David Scarpa, directed by Ridley Scott. This movie follows the rise and fall of Napoleon Bonaparte and his relationship with his wife, Josephine. And this movie pretty much is those two different stories here presented, but not really combined. I've never been so bored and yet so entertained at the same time. I think people forget, or they think that just because someone is known in the history books for doing something that is unexpected or beyond their control, or they invented something, that the rest of their life is important. If I discover the cure for something, please don't show the film or waste an hour talking about my childhood, because it's not that interesting. Don't go on about for 30 minutes about me making movie reviews. Again, it's not that interesting. We know people with great minds, or in this part Napoleon, who is great on the battlefield, and that is what he's known for, and that is what's so interesting about him, along with his stature, his Napoleon complex, right, where it comes from, and him also being a tyrant. Nothing else is interesting, not even his relationship with Josephine. Just because one of his last words was Josephine, we're following him for so long to see this pointless, toxic, and not very interesting relationship with this woman, and it just didn't matter. And we could probably pass that off to writing, possibly, because we've seen a lot of people try to write stories that really aren't that interesting, but they're able to attract some audience, or some people get invested. Here, it just shows us that Napoleon was obsessed, possessive, and infatuated with this woman, and that doesn't make it an interesting story. There are so many battles that Napoleon has been involved in, has led, has won, has lost, but we see maybe 4, 5. What also annoys me with many of these movies is that making every country, every person speak English, and on top of that, Joaquin Phoenix doesn't even have an accent. I mean, it was one thing to make his stature not really as small or short as he really was, so a lot of that didn't really hit, because that was a lot of what we know about him and why he behaved the way he does. Him being a tyrant, you got glimpses of it, but I don't think it was presented, or didn't feel it the way that we read about it or have learned about it in the past. And here, it was like I was watching people knowingly pretend to be other people, knowingly pretending to be these characters. I'm gonna assume that this movie was intentionally funny, with the intention to present itself as serious and unfunny. There were so many scenes I laughed at, so many scenes that not only myself, but the audience laughed at. And I started wondering, is this supposed to be a comedy? Because it doesn't feel like it. This movie was marketed, from what I remember, as a movie that's going to be a fighting movie about battles, about war, about Napoleon leading many of his military to war and losing a lot of his men. But I feel most of the tyranny here was with his wife, or in regards to his wife, Josephine. You know, we see how he and his wife slept with other people, how she was unable to bear a child for him, and they divorced, and him going to her before they even got together, before they got married, before he got emperor, and them arguing with each other over and over again. And we totally breezed over the Haiti thing in that story. But Scott has been critiqued for the third time in a row about whitewashing his movies and the history of it, and him defending it, whatever. And that doesn't really matter to me in regards to this movie. I don't care that that's not here in this movie, because this movie is not very good. And at a certain point halfway through this movie, I was wondering, have I lost interest in history films? Or do I just not care about Napoleon? And I think for the most part, it is the latter. However, I think a lot of it is just attributed to the writing. And there are so many other parts of the world, other parts of history regarding other parts of the world that we are not being told, that are not being put in the mainstream or commercial, right? It's just focusing on Europe, specifically Europe, and there are six other continents. I'm getting off track. That is not why this movie is bad or have an issue with this movie. It's just not good at all. But considering this movie is released at the beginning of, award season, we have Ridley Scott, Joaquin Phoenix involved. They will likely get nominated for something, but I do not see them winning. I hope. From what I understand or what I took from this movie, that there is a lot known about Napoleon and there is a lot going on in his life, particularly his adult life, especially during his time as emperor, including with his wife Josephine. And if that's the case, why try to cram it all into the single movie? Focus on one element, such as him as a fighter, or if you want to go the more romantic, Gilded Age, Downton Abbey, Bridgerton route, just focus on his relationship and just have the fighting as a side thing, as an afterthought. Although I know that people would be upset, especially with the way it's marketed, but market it differently. Or they could just make a series, a limited series, 4 to 5 hours of focusing on Napoleon. I would say wait for streaming, but this movie is not interesting. I don't even think history buffs would like it, but what do I know? Until next time, y'all take care of each other, check up on one another, make sure you check up on yourself, and remember, potential has no limit.